Your boss used to be fine with you. Now something has shifted. You show up on time, you do solid work, but nothing lands right anymore. The compliments stopped. The meetings feel colder. You start replaying conversations in your head, wondering what you did wrong. If you missed a deadline, if you said something offensive. You start wondering if it's worth trying anymore. But here is what almost nobody tells you. Sometimes a boss turns cold not because your performance dropped, but because it went up. And that makes them nervous. If that sounds familiar, you need to hear this. I'm Dre, and I've spent years inside corporate HR and hiring, sitting in on calibration meetings, performance reviews, and the closed-door conversations that most employees never get invited to. I'm not here to hype you up or sell you anything. I'm here to break down what actually happens behind the scenes when a manager starts treating a good employee like a problem. Today, we're covering 6 signs that your boss is intimidated by you, plus a bonus sign near the end and what you can actually do about it if you recognize yourself in this list. Quick note, none of this is legal advice. It's a pattern breakdown based on how these dynamics usually play out. And if this kind of insider look at workplace dynamics is useful to you, the subscribe button is right below. It genuinely helps this channel keep going. Before we get into the signs, it helps to understand why this happens at all. In my experience, insecure managers usually aren't villains twirling a mustache. They're often people who got promoted for reasons that had little to do with leadership skill, and they know it on some level. When someone on their team is clearly more capable, sharper in meetings, faster to solve problems, that competence starts to feel like a countdown clock on their own position. So instead of mentoring that person or learning from them, the instinct kicks in to control them, to keep them small enough that they never become an obvious replacement. It's rarely a calculated plan laid out on paper. It tends to be a slow drift in behavior that the manager themselves might not even fully admit to. That's exactly what makes it so disorienting to be on the receiving end of. Sign 1. They start talking about you behind your back. When a manager feels threatened by someone on their team, one of the first moves, often not even a conscious one, is to try to isolate that person. And the easiest way to isolate someone is to quietly damage how others see them. So they'll drop small comments in passing, frame your wins as lucky rather than earned, or bring up a mistake from months ago in a meeting you're not in. Most employees assume a cold boss is a private, one-on-one issue. In practice, it's rarely just private. It tends to move sideways to your peers and upward to whoever your boss reports to. You usually find out about it secondhand. A coworker mentions something offhand, or you walk into a meeting and the energy feels strange, like people already have an opinion about you that you didn't put there yourself. In some cases, you'll notice it show up in smaller invitations too. You stop getting looped into informal chats, side projects, or the kind of casual networking that used to happen naturally. And if your internal network suddenly feels thinner than it used to, that's often a downstream effect of comments being made about you when you're not in the room. To be fair, not every piece of critical feedback about you floating around is sabotage. Sometimes it's earned, and sometimes it's just normal workplace chatter. The tale isn't one comment. It's a pattern that keeps circling back to undermine you specifically. And once you notice that pattern, the next sign usually shows up right alongside it. Sign 2. Your ideas suddenly stop landing. You'll say something in a meeting that used to get a nod or a follow-up question, and now it just sits there, or gets quietly redirected to someone else. If you're in a room with senior leadership, watch how your boss behaves. A manager who feels outclassed will often jump in to steer the conversation back toward themselves before you get too much airtime. It's not always loud or obvious. Sometimes it's as simple as changing the subject right after you speak, or summarizing your point in a flatter, less impressive way. Which leads into sign 3, because eventually the dismissing turns into distance. Your boss starts finding reasons to skip one-on-ones, keeps interactions short and transactional, and stops making real eye contact. On the surface, it looks like they're just busy. Underneath, distancing is often a defense mechanism. It's easier to avoid someone than to sit with the discomfort of feeling outperformed by them.
There's a simple psychological reason the eye contact tends to go first, too. It's genuinely harder to hold someone's gaze when you feel resentful or threatened by them. So a manager who used to look you in the eye during a normal conversation and now consistently doesn't is often signaling more than they realize. This one stings because it cuts off your ability to build rapport or get useful feedback, which makes your actual job harder to do well. Not every quiet boss is intimidated, though. Some people are naturally reserved or genuinely overloaded. What separates intimidation from personality is whether the distance appeared suddenly, right around the time your performance started standing out. If two of these already sound familiar, stay with me, because the next sign is the one that actually costs you money and time, and most people don't clock it until years later. Sign 4. Your growth quietly stalls. This is one of the more damaging signs because it's slow and it's easy to explain away in the moment. Promotions you were on track for get pushed, first to next quarter, then indefinitely. Raises that used to come with your reviews suddenly need more justification than everyone else's. In some cases, you might even find yourself edged toward a performance improvement plan despite a solid track record, simply because it creates a paper trail that makes it easier to hold you back or move you out without the company having to say why directly. On top of that, a threatened manager will often bury you in low visibility, low impact work, tasks that keep you busy but don't build your case for promotion. Things like cleanup projects, backlog maintenance, or administrative work that used to be shared across the team and now somehow lands mostly on your desk. It's a strategy, whether conscious or not, meant to make advancement feel impossible, so that you either stay in place, quiet and compliant, or get frustrated enough to leave on your own. The caveat here matters. Budgets get frozen. Companies go through hiring slowdowns. And sometimes a stalled promotion really is about timing and not about you. What tips it into a red flag is when your output stays strong or improves, and the stalling only happens to you while peers with comparable performance keep moving. Sign 5. They never acknowledge what you actually accomplish. A secure manager knows that when their team looks good, they look good too. So recognizing your wins usually costs them nothing and benefits them directly. When a manager is threatened, that logic flips. Praise starts to feel like handing you ammunition. So you'll notice your manager stays quiet when a client or another department compliments your work. Or they'll find a way to attach a caveat to it. Something like it was a team effort, even when everyone in the room knows it was mostly you. Occasionally, they might even downplay a result you delivered directly to their own boss, presenting it in a status update using vague language instead of naming who actually did the work. This one is emotionally exhausting because you start to internalize it, wondering if your work is actually as good as you think it is. To be fair, not every manager is naturally expressive. Some genuinely struggle to give praise across the board, to everyone, not just you. The signal to watch for is whether recognition flows freely to your teammates but consistently skips you. Before we get to the last sign, I'm curious, which one of these you've experienced the most? Drop it in the comments, because usually one of these 6 hits harder than the rest, and it's rarely the one people expect. Sign 6. They micromanage you specifically. Some managers micromanage everyone. That's just their style, and it's not necessarily about you. But when a manager who leaves your peers alone suddenly wants visibility into your every move, tracking your hours, requesting updates on tasks that never needed updates before, second-guessing decisions you used to have full ownership over, that's a different pattern entirely. Micromanagement rooted in intimidation usually comes from a manager's fear of losing control. If they can't outperform you, the instinct becomes to control you instead. Your time, your process, your output, anything they can still hold power over. It tends to make the workplace feel smaller and more suffocating, and over time, it chips away at your confidence even in areas where you know you're competent. And here's a bonus sign that's easy to miss. A threatened manager will often try to control who you talk to above them. They'll insert themselves into every conversation with senior leadership. Route your updates through them instead of letting you present your own work, or discourage you from speaking up in cross-functional meetings.
Part of this is about controlling the narrative. They don't want you building relationships with people who could eventually make decisions about your future without their input. And part of it is fear that you might mention how they've been treating you. Over time, this can leave you feeling strangely invisible to the people who actually have influence over your career, even while you're doing work that would normally get you noticed. So, what do you actually do if you're recognizing yourself in most of this list? First, resist the urge to react emotionally. Even though it's completely understandable to feel frustrated or hurt, a defensive or heated reaction gives an insecure manager exactly the kind of behavior they can point to later, and it can end up working against you far more than it works against them. Second, start quietly documenting things. Dates, what was said, what was promised versus what happened. You don't need this for a lawsuit. You need it in case you ever have to advocate for yourself with HR or with your manager's boss down the line. Third, try a direct but low-ego conversation. Not a confrontation, a conversation. Let your manager know you value the team. You're not trying to undermine their role, and you like clear feedback so you can keep contributing well. Acknowledging their authority, even when it feels unearned in the moment, often lowers their guard enough to shift the dynamic, at least a little. Fourth, and this is the part people resist the most, know your exit points. If the behavior continues after you've tried to address it directly, that's usually a sign the issue isn't you, it's them. And no amount of diplomacy is going to fix a manager who is committed to feeling threatened. In that case, the healthiest move is often to start looking, quietly and strategically, for your next opportunity, rather than waiting for a manager who was never going to change. Fifth, while you're figuring out your next move, invest in relationships outside your direct reporting line. Cross-functional projects, other departments, mentors a level or two above your manager. These connections matter because they give people outside your immediate chain a first-hand view of your work, instead of a filtered version that's passed through someone who has a reason to downplay it. It also means that if things do come to a head, you're not relying on one person's account of your performance. Other people in the organization already have their own read on you, formed independently. So, if your boss went cold on you out of nowhere, it's worth remembering it's rarely actually about you falling short. More often, it's about you standing out in a way that made someone insecure feel exposed. That said, not every distant or critical boss is secretly threatened. Sometimes people are stressed, overworked, or dealing with something that has nothing to do with you. The real signal isn't any single moment, it's the pattern. Repeated, aimed specifically at you while your peers are treated differently. And again, none of this is a substitute for legal or HR advice specific to your situation. It's simply a breakdown of patterns worth watching for. If this helped you make sense of what's been going on at work, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next breakdown. Because next time, we're getting into exactly how to handle a performance improvement plan when you suspect it wasn't really about performance at all.